Okay, perfect. So this is for the class of today. What we're going to be looking at today, we have already reviewed your assignment that is in the previous video, and you all will get it. And this is a summary of what we want to look at today. After this class, you should have an understanding of the following, right? SQL Server Configuration Manager and all the configuration manager changes. So this means that after you should have be able to do all the changes at the level of configuration manager, those that you need to know for now. You're able to understand SQL Server Post Installation configurations or changes, changing the service account, starting and stopping SQL services, configure SQL Server network, set port numbers and IP addresses, how to log into SQL, configure maximum server memory. These are some of the post configuration changes. Configure the authentication mode, check the default file locations. This is something we have already done. Check the agent properties, right? Then the second part we're going to talk about, you need to understand SQL Server Management Studio, the releases and the versions, then all SQL Server, all the objects in SQL Server visible in SQL Server Management Studio. So this is our goal today, is just to walk you through SQL Server, make you comfortable, because that foundation is really needed. And after each slide, from the first slide, I'm going to pause and give you room for questions. Right. After each slide, I'm going to stop and give you room for questions. And when need be, I'm going to bring up the drawing board and I'll explain that. So we're going to start with SQL Server Configuration Manager. As we all know, each time you run an instance of SQL Server, you install, each time you run that installation, you install an instance. And that instance is also known as the database engine. Right, that instance it has a service and other properties that are attributed to it, and those properties are being managed in your configuration manager. So SQL Server Configuration Manager is a tool, right, to manage the services associated with SQL Server, right? You use that to configure the network protocols, which we're going to look at, used by SQL Server. You manage the network connectivity, right? Configuration from SQL Server client computers, SQL Server Configuration Manager installed with your SQL instance. So this is just summarizing the fact that SQL Server Management Studio or Configuration Manager, you use that to configure your network protocols, you use that to configure your SQL services, right? And network protocols, we're going to look at that. You use that to configure your aliases. You use that to start and stop your SQL services. So the changes made at the level of the configuration manager are start, stop, resume or stop services. We're going to look at those services today. You view service properties, the properties of all of those services. Properties here might involve the account that is running those services, the passwords and all of that. You set a port number, right? And then you make changes to that property. This is what you do in SQL Server. You can also create or remove server aliases. So I'm going to explain this. What is a server alias? Because we might not set this up today. It is advanced for the beginners class. So in our company, practically we have a server called prod. This is our prod server, right? We have our prod server here. With our prod server, I know that if I have to connect here, right? If I have to connect to this prod server, I need to go to my SQL Server Management Studio and I type in the connection to my prod server. Or let me do the default. No, let me just leave it to the prod. So now, just like in your network, let us say tomorrow we install another server. We install another server here, and we want to migrate all of these databases. We install another server here called prod update. And on this prod update, we want to migrate all our databases from here over to our prod server over to our over to the new server, right? So you know, in communication, in network communication, you need to have a name, you need to have an IP address, right? You need to have a name, you need to have an IP address. So most of the time, because applications are already connected to this database server, right, on prod, and you know that each time you do this migration, applications will not understand that, okay, this database has changed. You can create an alias and you tell this application that, okay, this server name here, I'm going to create an alias on this my new server called prod, right? I can call it prod alias, a prod A. So in my connection string now on this application, this server is still here, but I want this application to connect but to prod. So I give an alias of this server to this new one. Once I have done that, just like there is Milton in this class, alias Graham Milo, right? So if I call Graham Milo, he knows that I'm calling him. But I can also go ahead and I call Milton directly. So that is the same thing like giving aliases for somebody. In SQL Server, I have an instance that I install. I'm trying to migrate from that instance to another computer. I don't want to go through the hustle of changing connection strings for the application. So I just go here, I create on this my new server, I create an alias that when you connect to this server using this new name, the alias name, it should route you to this old server, right? So it's just an alias is just like your name. I used to be called Grand Maroc back home. So when they call me Grand Maroc, that's my alias. But my actual name is Brian. So it goes to Grand Maroc and it directs to me, the same as all of you are doing in this class. So we're going to see how to create those aliases in Configuration Manager. That is where you do them, right? That is one thing. Create or remove server aliases. As we have talked about it, just understand what an alias is. Then we manage network protocols. I know there might be some network guys in this class, and you understand that to connect to SQL Server database engine, you must have a network protocol enabled, right? The protocols used by SQL Server for communication, we're going to look at those. So in a network, every computer has a name, it has an IP address. And most of for the most part, the IP address protocol or the protocol that is used to communicate with the internet is TCP IP for those who are doing networking. Transmission Control Protocol, right? That is what they use to communicate. So SQL Server has 3 protocols that can be used for communication. You have the name pipe, you have TCP IP, and you have the shared memory protocol. We're going to see all of those in the next slide, right? So this is for this slide. If you have any questions as far as this is concerned, just go ahead and ask them. I'll address that before we move forward. Questions?
Brad.
Yes.
This alias instance that you create, is it like for replication or backup? Because there should be the same instances. Since it's prod and prod alias, it should be the same. So maybe you're just migrating from one to another.
Yes. So one of the things, when you are dealing with DNS changes, right? This application that is connected to this SQL Server, right? It's connected here. There is a DNS entry for this server that can be called prod.kiawitech.com. Right, that is what this application knows. So I want to route this application that, okay, since this prod is going to be gone in the days ahead, I want to create an alias because I don't want to change a DNS entry for this application. I'm going to still leave that DNS entry in my environment. It is still standing there, but I'm just going to come here on this, my new instance, and I create an alias that each time somebody try to log in here, or probably log in here, it will route them to where that DNS entry is located at. And these are things that are very easy. It's just like to go and right click and you put in a name. Okay, can you explain the alias using another form? Okay, so let me explain the aliases using another form. Alias is just a second name, but referring to the same thing. I can nickname Ella, but referring to, okay. So exactly, aliases is just a second name. And you have to explain that in a different form. Let me do this. So in our environment today, we have a computer. And we have a computer. This computer is called prod computer, right? This is our prod computer. That is a computer name. The IP address is 192.168.0.1. Let me just do this. 192.168.0.1. This computer here, it has databases. I'm going to call this a sales database. there's a sales database on this on this server, right? Applications are connected to this database. Applications are connected to this database. In this application, there is a connection string. And what is the connection string to this application? The connection string is actually, it takes the computer name, which is prod, and it takes the IP address, which is 192.168.0.1. So this is what this application knows, right? Okay, so now I want to migrate this name. There is already a DNS entry for this name in my system, right? Meaning that I'm gonna have a DNS name called prod.kiawitech.com. Right? So this application is connecting here, but it knows that this is a DNS name for this server. I want to do away with this server, or maybe I just want this application to connect to this application to connect to the database, but the database has been migrated to another server. So I get my new server here. I install it. This new server name is called prod alias, and it has an IP address of 192.168.0.2. Right. So now, what will happen if I have to take this server offline? If I take this server offline, by default, this computer, this application that is connected here, it knows but prod, and it knows but what? The IP address. So creating an alias, meaning that I don't want to change any of these connections here. I don't want to change any of these connections in this application. I just want to change but that DNS entry, so that for this application, it still thinks like it is connected here, but this server has been replaced with an alias that is over here. So each time this application tries to put a connection to prod.kiawitech.com, it is going to route that connection to where? prod.a.kiawitech.com. Right? It is going to route that connection here. So at this point, I have no changes to make at the level of this application. This application stays the way it is. But when it tries to connect, it will go this way, but then this guy has an alias that is over here. So the application will, by default, route to that alias because this guy is not available again, right? So this DNS name here, the DNS name here, prod.kiawitech.com, also is going to be the same when an application tries to connect. Gets here, like, I don't see this person, but this person have an alias, and this is the alias over here. It's going to make that connection to this server. At that point, my application is good. I don't make any changes to that application connection string. Does that make sense?
Brian.
Yes.
Yes, it does. So it's kind of like failover backup. So it's kind of like if the alias is it's an instance where it fails over. But since the IP is different, it fails over using the DNS name.
Exactly.
Yeah, to my understanding, it means like the alias is kind of like a directory where like it directs
connection.
You know, anytime.
So it directs connection to a particular server, right? So that is an alias. Just like Milton, that we call him Grand Milo. When I call Grand Milo, what happens? Even though that is just a name, but by default, you know, I'm trying to get to Milton. So I'm gonna come here. This is Grand Milo, right? But this is where I'm going to because Grand Milo is referring to Milton. Oh, so it's just the other way around. Do not really worry about this. Clearly understand what instance do you make an alias. So the time that you make an alias is like during migration. If you are trying to migrate or during upgrade, right? There are some applications that their connection string here embedded in there. You cannot change them. Whatsoever this application was configured to connect to, it is difficult to change this. You need to get developers to come and update this to be able to point to somewhere else because this application already have this connection string. It's difficult to change it. So when you are doing migration now, you just keep that same DNS entries for the application, but it will not route them now to this server. It will probably route them now to the alias, right? But the DNS entries, they are still the same. The application, no changes is made at the level of the application, right? What the main reason for creating an alias? Like I've said, that is during migration. It is good, and it's also good for security reasons, right? Because aliases are also good. They can help in preventing somebody getting into your computer. They will not know what the actual name is or where it is routing to. So aliases can also be used for security reasons, and we'll understand all of those. All right.
Brian.
Yes.
Let me use this example to see if I actually understood the whole thing about alias. So let's say you move from your former apartment to a new one, and before moving, you were owing, let's say, some money on your CPS bill. You didn't pay your CPS bill before moving, and now you call to switch your account to the new apartment. They're gonna make it in such a way that even though you change your apartment, the bills that you owed on the former one is still gonna be directed to the new apartment. So the account is still gonna be the same, but they just switched it, and the bills now come to the new apartment instead of the old one.
Yeah, perfectly. That is another understanding of it. That is the same thing, right? That is a good illustration of it. So even though you are in the new apartment, but your bills that are in the old apartment, they still know that, okay, you are owing this in the old apartment. So when they try to reach to that bill in the old apartment, it's gonna send that bill over to you, saying that this bill has been transferred over here. Get the bill from this new apartment, right? So yeah, that is a good understanding of it, Ephraim.
So I have a question.
Hello, Brian.
Yes. So I'm seeing a question here. I guess you can create an alias to any instance, be the default instance or a named instance. Yes, you can create an alias to any instance. Yes, question?
Yeah, I had a question.
Yes, go ahead.
So you just talked about the example you gave on the prod and the prod A, the two different instances.
Mm-hmm.
And then you gave an example of a database that was in that instance, sales database.
Yes.
So if you're creating an alias, can you create an alias inside the database itself that will reflect on the other instance, on the other database in the other instance? Both instances have the alias?
No, so because this database is here, remember I said the main reason for the alias is when you are migrating. So if we create an alias here, we're gonna create this database, right? If we are creating an alias, what we need to do is, the main reason for creating that is because we are migrating this database over from this prod to the DR. So we're just gonna take this database over from here and bring it over to DR. There is no way where I can create an alias on a database that when you try to access this, the sales database, give it by the name this. You don't create aliases at the database level. You create them on the instance level, right? Because now this application here is connected to the sales database on this prod server. I have migrated the sales database to the prod A server. So I've created the alias at the instance level, which the instance level now is the prod server, right? That is where that's the instance level. So the application, to get to a database, what do you need access to? You need to pass through the instance before you get into the database, because the database is being hosted on the instance. You cannot get directly to the database without passing through the instance, right?
Okay.
Yeah.
Hello, Brian.
Yes.
Yes. I just like follow up to the questions that to understand that FM asks. But I'm not owing a bill though. So like you're moving from one apartment to another, like a new neighborhood, like you're moving from a new neighborhood to another neighborhood, right? And then you give like a 2 weeks to the post office that you're changing the change of address, and then you finally go to your new home. So when you have a mail going down to that old address, it would now take you to the post office, and it will send the mail to the new post office, and then the mail come to you. It says on the mail that a new address. So is that the same thing like alias?
Exactly. That's the same thing, address forwarding, right? You just forward from this address. When you are moving, You say, hey, you go to UPS, I've changed from here to here. And now UPS, when mails are being addressed now to you, what happened is UPS routing now to the address that you have changed to. That is the same thing.
Okay, sir.
Perfect. So somebody asked, is alias the same as an agent? No, we're gonna look at that in class. I guess you can create an alias to many instances. Yes, you can. All right. So that was it for that slide. Other slides might answer your question, but we have had enough questions for that alias. If you have any other thing for this particular one, note it down at the end of the class. If the question is not addressed, bring it up. Okay. So your other questions are going to be answered in other slides. The next thing again, remember under SQL Server Configuration Manager, we have talked about restarting. That is a summary of that slide. What do you do under Configuration Manager? You can restart, stop, purge, or start the services. We're going to do all of this in the labs. You can create server aliases, and you can manage network protocols. So now we have talked about the services, right? So let's also all look at the service versus a service account. Everything that you do, every application on your computer does have a service associated with it, right? How do you know the services on your computer? If I go to my search and I just type in services, if I just type in services, this is going to come up. And I see here most of them, you have inbuilt services that are just there to run Windows. The various components of Windows, they are running on services, right? You see all of them here. These are the services. If you install Word, Microsoft Office Word or something, you see, it's going to have a service that is running that particular installation, right? You're going to have a service that is running that particular installation. So for the most part, this is my antivirus, McAfee. It has a service, or you have services that are running McAfee. Each time you run an installation of an application in your computer, there is a service that runs that application. Windows create that service that runs the application. So if this service now, if I don't want this to run, right, I can right-click here and stop it. If I have the permission to do that, I can right-click and I will stop the services on this computer. When you install SQL as well, SQL comes up with its own services, right? SQL, if I go here, Microsoft SQL Server, where is that? Where is the SQL Server services? So this. Let me call it SQL. Okay, so you see all the services that you have that you install SQL, they are also here at the Windows level. But because SQL also have a dedicated portion or area where you need to use it to manage its services, which is called a configuration manager, you can also see these services there, same as for every other application. So these are my SQL services. I can stop any of these services here. I can stop any of these services here, and it will stop the service from running, right? The application will not be able to run because this service is not running. It's just like your heart. If they stop your heart, your body cannot work, right? Your body cannot work. So these are how services work. So we have said in SQL, there are services. Those are the services. And now these services, the SQL services run on a service account. What account runs this service? Just like you have an account that you use to log into your computer. That is the account that can have access to your computer. Same with SQL services. You use these accounts to log into these accounts are being used to run the SQL services, right? So a service is a program that runs in the background that does not require any user interaction. So the service is just there. You are interacting just with the application. SQL services can be configured to run with the following type of service accounts. So remember our last class, we talked about a service account, right? What is a service account? A service account to run SQL is a dedicated account that is just used to run SQL Server. It's a dedicated account. And there are other types of service accounts, but today class, we're gonna look at a domain user account, which is the recommended account that you need to use to run SQL, right? It is an Active Directory account. So what is, first of all, a domain? In a company like Amazon, there is a domain called Amazon.com. All the employees of Amazon, they have a central management system that manages all the users of Amazon, all the employees. When you come into the company, they create an account for you in the company, they go to Active Directory, they add you there. That way it's a centralized management area to manage all the users, the computers, and whatsoever. So it is recommended that SQL, you use a domain account to run SQL. We're going to talk about domain, controllers, and Active Directory. But just understand that. The next thing here is there is a network service account. Network service account is a predefined local account used by the service control manager. So it is a predefined. You don't create those ones. It's already an account locally on your computer, right? And when you install SQL or something, there is a local account. So this one here is a network service account. It is inbuilt, right? You don't have money, you don't create it, you don't do anything. But remember, you can create a domain account. There is also a local system account, and we're gonna see that. So a local system account is an account that exists on every Windows NT or Windows 2000 system, right? This special account has full access to local computer, right? But has absolute no access to network resources. So this account here, the local system account, this one is an account that is already in SQL. It's already in your computer. When you run SQL, by default, if you don't tell SQL that use this domain account or use this account, SQL is going to use the local system account to run it. And what is the disadvantage here, right? The account has full access to the local computers, but has absolutely no access over the network. Because SQL is an application you install not just to run on a local computer. Let me explain this a little bit so you can get an idea of it. SQL is an application that does not just depend on one computer. You can have a SQL server here that hosts databases. You have another SQL server here. You have a backup location in your network that these two SQL accounts, they need to back up these two SQL instances. The services that are running this instance need to be able to back up in this location, right? This is a network location. This is a network location that requires access for everybody to access it. So this is your prod here, and this is your dev here. This is your dev. So now, your dev, what service is running this? The service is what actually has permission to do anything on that system or over the network. So let me say here, we are running on a local account, right? This one, we are running it on a local account. So with the local account, remember, it has full permission on this, your prod computer. It has full permission here. But when it comes over to your network resources, you cannot give permissions to this local account here, right? The local system account, you cannot give it permission here. So at this point, if you want to configure this SQL Server to back up in a network location, it will not, because this account cannot have permission over this network location. But if you have a domain account is a centralized, a domain, first of all, is a central management system, like in the entire organization, where all your computers are in there. This is a domain. And in this domain, there is always what is called an Active Directory, where you put in all your users in the company. You have all your users here in the company in this Active Directory. And these users, you can give them permission. You can give them permission to access whatever resource that they need access to in your company. So if SQL Service is running on a domain account, and in your Active Directory, you have indicated, okay, this domain account that you have created have access to this network location. So by default, SQL will be able to use this domain account that is running that service to have access to back up to this network location, right? Just generally, you might not get a clear understanding of this, but as you are moving forward, you will understand that. Let me finish the slide and have questions. The next one is the next account that can be used to run services or local accounts in your system is a local user account. In Windows, a local user account is one whose username and an encrypted password are stored on the computer itself. Most of your accounts now, you can create a local user on your account, which is something that we can do to run our SQL instances, right? This first slide here is just to explain to you there are various accounts that you use to run SQL, right? That can be used to run SQL. But the recommended account, SQL services should run here. And why is that recommended, right? Remember, your job as a database administrator first is security. You need to make sure your databases are secure. So apart from configuring the right security permissions for SQL Server and the login, it is also important to select the right account to run SQL services. And the right account here is the domain account, right? The recommended service account for SQL is the domain user account, is the most recommended account for setting up SQL services that interacts with other servers in the network. And this is exactly what I've said. If this server has to interact with all other servers in this network, then you need a domain account. But if it's just going to be a local server, it is okay to use. It is okay to use just your local system account to run it. And you're going to see this when we start talking in a few minutes. We're going to show you what your SQL account is running on now. So one of the plus points for using a domain user account is that the account is controlled by Windows Active Directory. Therefore, domain level policies can apply. So because your local system account is not configured, it's not managed by Active Directory, you cannot manage this account, right? But this account has full permission on your computer. So if somebody has to enter with this account, they'll be able to do anything. If you create a domain user account, you can manage the permission. You can give this domain user, okay, what level of permission do you need in my network? What level of permission do you need in order to operate SQL Server, right? Let me take a few questions here, and we will proceed. Any questions as far as these service accounts are concerned? Questions?
Brian.
Yes, sir.
So just like when we were installing the SQL Server, you remember this part where we had to add an account?
Yes.
What we all did was add the account from the local system account because that was our computer name account.
Yes, so you added a local user. You added a local, what is wrong with my mouse? Really? Okay, so you added a local user. The account that you added, which in my case here, you see it was my computer name and my C Brian account, CBRIAN, that is a local system account, right? Because that account is just on your Windows, you created it to log into your computer as a local user account. And we have not created a domain account. And we have also, we don't have a network account, but it should be there. If any service that needs to run with a network, you'll see it there. And what we have SQL running on now, what account is running SQL is a local system account. And I will show you that in just a minute. Okay?
Okay, so if you are the DBA, the administrator now, are you supposed to have, does the domain account have power over all of these other accounts? Can you use your domain account to access an instance over the network?
Yes, and that is the main reason for a domain account, because you can manage the permissions of a domain account. That is the main reason for a domain account. As a database administrator, you might have access, or when you want to install SQL, that is one of the things. You need to first of all know what account you need to use to run SQL services. If that account has to be a domain account, right, you need to, if it is not existing already, you can create a ticket and tell the system admin guys, I need a domain user to be created so I can use that to run SQL services. And the system admin guys will create that, they'll give it to you. And when you are done installing your SQL server, you'll be able to go to Configuration Manager. I'm going to show this to you, and you just change the name, right? You see now we are using you see this is NT. These are the local accounts that we are using to run SQL, right? These are local system accounts. All these ones that you are seeing like this. These are the local system accounts that are running SQL now. And I will show you all of those.
Can you run like 2 accounts simultaneously?
No, each service has just one account that runs it, right? Okay, but when you install SQL, I have, in this my instance, I have a prod instance and I have a default instance. I can use a different domain account to run, I can use a different domain account to run the services on my prod. I'll use a different domain account to run the services on my default instance. And the advantage of this is if somebody has to hack into my system, right, and they get hold of my prod, that is, if they have the same account, if you already get hold of my prod, you know, you can use the same account to get hold of my default, right? So it's good for them to have separate accounts to run each of these services. But is that practice all the time? Me, actually, at my job, no. So for the most part, I've created about 6 service accounts to run SQL on the agent. When I want to install SQL, I just use one of them. So it's not a good practice, because if somebody gets into one, then they can get into all of my instances and they'll cause a lot of trouble.
Hi, Brian.
Yes.
Can we liken the local user account to a guest account on your computer?
So a guest account is a local account as well, but it's still local on that computer, and it's a guest account.
And because I noticed if you give maybe a guest account, it doesn't have as much permission as the local system account, which is your own login detail, right?
Yes.
That's what I'm likening it to. So, I mean, somebody with a guest account, obviously, if you don't give the permission to the guest using your computer to be able to log into your server or SQL server, the person cannot. So, the way liking it to it, I'm just trying to get a better understanding.
Okay, so the way I'll take this to explain to you, look at this. Let me bring this up again, right? You have your computer. This is your computer here. You can create as many users, and this is your computer. You can create a val1, right? I say val1 is the administrator. You create a val2 for your son, like a guest. That's like a guest account. You can create multiple guest accounts, right, on your computer, right?
Yes.
Okay, we have val3. At the end of it, all of these accounts, you might give them certain level of permission, but what are they? They are all local accounts on this your computer. All of them, they are all local accounts on this your computer. They are local user accounts, regardless of the level of permission that they have, but they are all local accounts. I'm not saying that use this one to run SQL, use this to run SQL. You can use all of these as long as you have given it the permission to run services on your computer. You can use any of them to run SQL, but SQL should be, the SQL services should run on a domain account, right? That is all I want you to get from there. It can run on whatsoever local account that you have on your computer, but the best practice is for it to run on a domain account, okay?
So
Does
Brian,
that answer?
quick.
And it's just practically the combination of you know, all the other accounts, like the local and network accounts.
So a domain, with a domain account, you can give a domain account full permission on this server. You can give a domain account minimal permission on this server. It is just like it is easier to manage and tell you that this is the only permission that you have, as compared to this local system, the local system accounts. You cannot control the level of permission that they have. Like your SQL is running now on this local system account, right? It has full 100%.
You cannot change it. Okay.
Power. It has 100%. You cannot even change. You don't even know the password. You cannot change this password. It's in there. It's inbuilt by default. You cannot change it. You cannot manage this account. So it has absolutely 100% permissions over your system. So, but we don't want that for security reasons. Okay. Is 2 minutes to our break time good enough? I was able to record that. 12, 1, 2. Okay, so I think we're on time. So it's 2 minutes of our break time. Do you all want to take, I think it's a 10 minutes. Actually, I said 15, but it's 10 minutes. You all want to take a 10 minutes break and we come back?
Yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, so let me pause the recording and take a 10 minutes. All right, so now we're going to be talking on SQL Server Management Studio, right? Just to give you an overview of what this is. I'm going to walk you through everything in SQL Server Management Studio. So Management Studio, like it's called SQL Server Management Studio, is an integrated environment for managing any SQL infrastructure, right? So when we talk of SQL infrastructure, it might be like all those databases, everything that it has to do with SQL, you can use Management Studio to manage that, right? It is used to access, configure, manage, administer, and develop all components of SQL Server. You can use it to manage databases in Azure, right? Use it to manage SQL.
Hey, Brian, I'm not seeing your screen.
Can you please share your screen,
I'm
sir?
not seeing your screen.
What?
I'm not seeing your screen.
Are you sure?
Yeah.
What do you see?
Just
This
your
is the
Desktop.
umbrella.
A desktop. You see a desktop.
Really?
Really?
That is old age, guys. I always say this all the time. I'm getting old. You see now?
Yeah, I can see that. Thank you.
Okay.
Recording.
So Management Studio, you actually use this just to manage anything that has to do with your SQL
Brad,
Server. Yes.
are you recording?
Yeah, I'm recording. So we have to create, configure, administer, manage, develop anything that has to do with SQL Server, create your job. So this is where you're going to be spending the rest of your career if you stay as a database administrator. Managing just this one interface like this. You can do everything there, right? It's just to understand it. I always repeat this. I will say this thousands of times before you finish this course. Doing everything in SQL is very easy. You need just 2-3 clicks to do it. The reason is understanding why and when you have to do that, right? So pay attention to this. So this is what you use SQL Server Management for, right? And how to connect to SQL Server. When you already install, please mute yourself. When you install an instance of SQL Server, right, it installs you a database engine. It installs a database engine. So that database engine, how do you connect to that database engine, right? You connect to it using the Management Studio. And on the connection string here, on the connection interface here, you see the server type that you want to connect to. You see all of these, what kind of login, please, is it Abio? Please, can you mute yourself, please?
Oh, sorry.
The first half of the class was very good. There was no noise. You all follow the rules. So let's continue like that. By default, stay muted. Okay, so you see everything here to connect, right? One of the things that you see as a database administrator during your first 3-5 weeks at work is troubleshooting login issues. That is somebody trying to connect to a database, they cannot. And we're gonna start seeing some of those things today. So now, how do you connect to SQL Server? There are 2 types of authentication modes that you can use to connect to SQL. There is a Windows authentication, right? And by default, SQL Server uses Windows authentication. And there is what is called a mixed mode authentication. So there are 2 authentication modes to connect to SQL. And what are they? Windows authentication or mixed mode authentication. Mixed mode authentication, most of the time, is referred to as SQL Server authentication. And what are these? It is important that you understand. When you are installing SQL Server, it gives you an option to select the authentication mode, right? It gives you an option to select the authentication mode. So when we are, let's say this is our SQL Server, and when we're installing SQL Server, we use a Windows authentication. What is a Windows authentication? This is already our computer, and in this computer, we have installed an instance of SQL, and this instance of SQL is called Port, right? Okay, for me to connect to this instance of SQL, I need permission. And there are 2 ways that I can connect to this instance of SQL. The 2 ways I can connect to this instance of SQL are, that was a big arrow. The 2 ways I can connect to this instance of SQL are, the first way is I can use a Windows authentication, or I use a mixed mode authentication, right? Those are the 2 ways. So what is Windows authentication? Remember, this is my Windows computer called CBR, and my instance name here is called the instance of SQL that I've installed. How do I get to this instance of SQL? First, if I use the Windows authentication, it means if I log into Windows, this is Brian sitting right here. This is Brian sitting right here, right? First, I get into my computer. I already have a username and a password on my computer. I just go to my computer and I click the username and password that I used to log into my computer here is, the username is Brian, B-R-O-I-A-N, and the password is XXXXXXX. So when I sit here and I type in this password, it logs me into my computer. And because when I was installing SQL, SQL gave me the option that, okay, add your current user. I click on that option, that add current user. So by default, this my user, Brian, already have login access to this instance of SQL, to the prod instance. So when I log in now to Windows knows that, okay, Brian, I've already authenticated. Authentication is the process of gaining access. right? Because I already have access to Windows, and this my account that I use to install SQL is the same account that I've used to log into Windows. I can, by default, just log into my instance without providing a username or a password. And that is why you will see here, where is that SQL itself? That is why you will see here, if I need to connect to SQL, if I want to connect to SQL, you see here, there is an authentication. It is Windows authentication. And what has happened is I can see this is Windows authentication because the username is already grayed out. It means that, and this is the name I use to log into my computer. By default, if I just click connect, it's not going to ask me for username or password again because I have already authenticated myself at the level of Windows. And by authenticating myself at the level of Windows, it means I have access to this instance of SQL Server. On the other side, what is mixed mode or SQL Server authentication? SQL Server authentication now is, okay, I don't need to log in to Windows before I have access to this prod instance. All I need to do is I come to this prod instance and I create a username here and I create a password for that username. So now, when I have this created in SQL and I tell that, okay, this is a SQL authentication. If I want to log into my computer now using SQL authentication, all I need to do, I go to login, and here I make sure I select SQL Server authentication. Then it's going to give me an option now to put in a username, which is a login, and a password to connect to SQL. At this point, this account might be an account that does not even have login to your computer, right? It's just a SQL account that you have created at the level of SQL. That is just to explain to you the difference between these slides. When we are doing practicals, you understand. And now, what are the main things that you need to look on? When you are installing SQL and you tell SQL that, let me go here, what is my authentication mode? I can go there, go under security. You see, I selected SQL Server and Windows authentication. This is known as a mixed mode authentication. And if I have selected just Windows authentication, it means before I log into SQL, I must log into Windows. That account must have a Windows login. But if I select this one, the account does not necessarily need a Windows login to get into SQL, right? I'm going to take 2 questions here because we're going to do this practically again. Just 2 questions on this one, then we move to the next slide so we can get into the labs by 2 o'clock. Any questions between?
Can you retake that last option?
I have a question. So
yes.
Like, so let's say if we chose like the Windows authentication, so no one can access, you know, the SQL Server from, let's say, another, like remotely, since the person will not be able to log into Windows.
For a person to access SQL Server, right, even if it is remotely, you need to log into that Windows computer with that account. With the account that you log into that Windows computer need to have access now to that SQL Server. You need to log into a computer that is a Windows computer by default. All domain users, right, they have a login access to be able to log into any computer in the network. So now what happens is when that user, the domain user, if you have a login to SQL, which is a Windows login matching your username, you'll be able to access that instance of SQL once you log in. But even if you're a domain user and they have not created a login for you in SQL Server using that your domain user account, you will not be able to log in to that instance of SQL. So in your case now, limit this to this point, right? In your case now, you have created the account you used to install SQL, and the one you added is a Windows account. You can use that to log in to SQL using Windows authentication.
Okay. So with the mix, you don't need to go through Windows if you're trying to log into your instance from a different location.
If with SQL authentication.
Yeah.
Yes.
You don't need to go through Windows.
You need to, you can be logged into Windows, but that account that you use to log into Windows does not have access to SQL. But the account that you really want to use to access SQL was a SQL account, an account that was created in SQL. So once you log into your Windows now, you can log into SQL using that SQL account that was created just for SQL, not a Windows account.
Okay.
Sorry,
Alright,
Brian.
thank you.
Sorry, Brian. Yeah, what is the SQL username? Is it like the like I saved my prod as a SQL_prod? Would that be the username?
No, so when we come to usernames, we're gonna do it. What is the username that you use to log into your computer?
My email.
Okay, so that's your computer, that's your username. And if you go to SQL, that is the user that you added as the admin of SQL. You're able to log into SQL with that account. So if you need to create another user now for your computer, you can go on your same computer. I can go here. You see, I went to computer management. The labs are gonna come, right? I don't want to fast forward it, but we see how we can log in. Understand that there are two authentication modes. There is a Windows and a mixed mode authentication when you are installing SQL that you can select and can be changed after installation. Once with a Windows authentication, the Windows account that you use to log in needs to have access to that SQL server, and it will automatically let you in without asking for a username or a password, because that Windows account that you have logged in by default has already authenticated through Windows, and it should authenticate in a SQL if you have created a login for it. If you don't have a Windows, or if, let me say you have just one Windows account, which is you right now, right? Let me just do this to clear this on, to clear the understanding. You have just one Windows account now, Val. Let me do this. This is always hard to explain. So right now you have your computer here, right? And you have SQL install. You have SQL install, and you have just one. You have just one Windows account that you have created, right? This is your prod instance. This is your prod instance. And on your computer now, you have just your Val account. So you have your Val account. Your Val account, you can use it now to get into SQL because you have already configured SQL to use Windows authentication. So once you log into Windows, by default, then you should get logged into SQL. But right now, what if you wanted to create 50 other accounts that you can use to log into SQL, but you don't want them to be in Windows? You want that, okay, each time I'm logging as Val, I can also access SQL without logging out of this Windows to log in as another user. Let me just say we have on your Val computer, as we said earlier, you have other users here. You have Val 1, you have Val 2, you have Val 3, right? So now, since Windows authentication means that the computer, you need to log into Windows before you get access to SQL. You are Val 1, you are Val now, you manage all of this, right? Your Val account has different permissions. Your Val 1 has different permissions. Your Val 2 has different permissions. So going with what you have now, you need to log in as Val and then open up SQL. But if you want to log in now, but as Val 1 to SQL, you need to sign out from your Windows computer, log into the computer now as Val 1, and Val 1 will have access to SQL, provided you have given Val 1 login permission to SQL. The same thing for Val 2. So, but now, since I don't need all this Windows account to get, I don't want to be logging in and off and in to do something. With my Val account here, I have access to SQL. I will just create a login to SQL called Val 1 SQL login, Val 2 SQL login, and Val 3. So now, just with you logging into Windows as Val, you can still log in now to SQL as these SQL accounts that you have created called Val 1, Val 2, and Val 3. Okay?
Okay.
And you'll see that as we move forward.
What if I don't create the Val 1 SQL, Val 2, and 3 SQL, and I mean, like the Val 1 logs into my account, I give the person my username and password. My username, which should be my email, the name of the computer, right? Then give the password as password 1, like we used. Can the person get into SQL?
Well, if the person, okay, so you're just telling me now, one moment, you are just telling me now that if you give me your laptop and you give me a username and your password that I should log in, will I have access to SQL?
No. The person log in as a guest.
Let's say the person, Val 1, yes, a guest log into your laptop now.
Yeah.
And the guest account is Val 1, right?
Yeah, the guest didn't use my Windows, didn't log in with my Windows account, right?
Yes.
The person log in. Now, I did not create a permission originally for val1 SQL, val2 SQL log, and 3 SQL log. Okay? But the guest just logged into my computer. I just need something. I remembered something. I said, oh, can you go to my SQL? This is my username. This is my password. Log on to SQL. I want to get this done. Is it possible?
No, because you have Windows authentication. For that person to get access to Windows, to SQL, they need to log into that computer with that Windows authentication, which is your username and your password. Because the person is logged in with val1, with val1 does not have login access to SQL. We do not configure it. And on val1, you cannot, it's not as if when you bring up SQL Server Management Studio, like I would do now, right? If I bring this up and I try to log in here, if I go here, let me say I have another account called val1. That is a Windows account, right? And I put SQL Server, and I put here val1. I know for a fact that val1 is a Windows account. I put in the password, right? Password. I try to log in, it will not work because that
you don't get my question. You don't get my question, Brian. What I'm saying is the person logs in as a guest, but I provide a person with my SQL username and password, not the Windows username and password.
Yes, the person will be able to log in because the person have already logged in, and on SQL, all you need is the login and password. So if you have a SQL login, that is what I want you to understand. Your val account that you are giving that person to log in, if it's a Windows account, not a SQL account, it will not let that person log in. You need to have a SQL account in order to use this. And to have a SQL account, it is created differently. That kind of a login is created differently. When you go under your, we are going faster. Let me just close this up. When you go under your logins to create a new login, there is an option that you select a Windows authentication or a SQL Server authentication. Because your account now, Val, was a Windows authentication account. If somebody log into your computer and you give that person your account to log into SQL, right? The person will not be able to, because once you are logged into that computer, you cannot come here under SQL, you are typing a Windows account for a login. It will not work.
I think what he's saying is if someone logs into his computer and he shares his SQL Server account with the person, will the person be able to log in? I know the answer is definitely yes.
Yeah, definitely. If you have a SQL Server account, but if you have a Windows account, the person will need to log out from that computer, log in without your Windows account before they can get access to SQL Server.
Hello, Brian, can you get me?
Understood.
Yes.
Can you get me?
Yes, Chi.
Yes, I think his question is a bit tricky because if the person logs in as a guest, if on his computer, he has restricted guests from accessing to his SQL, his SQL, he will not be able, the guest will not be able to, even if the person has his credentials, except the SQL Server is among the shared resources on his computer. So he needs to understand that guests have limited access.
Even if you log in as a guest, right, SQL does not know who a guest is or who is not a guest. SQL understands the SQL Server authentication and the Windows authentication. If you log in as a guest account,
laptop on his machine.
Yes.
Because of machines, if you're a guest, there are some limitations. You can set in such a way that guests have access just to the shared resources, and you may limit them. That a guest may have access maybe just to Office, to all of that, and may not have access to this. So it also depends on the settings he has set on his computer for guests, because if it is that the guest can have access to everything on his computer, good and fine. But if the restriction is for guests, then the guest may not be able to have access to that. So he needs to understand that part also.
All right, so let's leave that for now. Understand this. There are two types of authentication in Windows. You have in SQL, you have a Windows authentication and you have a mixed mode authentication. For Windows authentication, the Windows account, when you log into Windows, if that account have access, it will automatically get you to SQL without you asking you for a username or a password. But with SQL authentication, you need to click there, type in a username and a password. And a Windows login cannot be used to log in using the SQL authentication. That is what I want you to understand now. As we move forward, you really understand it. You people are asking questions. It's really good. They are really advanced things, because to answer all your questions now, I need to go ahead and create a login to demonstrate how a SQL user is going to log in and how a Windows user is going to log in. That is a little bit ahead of time, right?
I wanted to ask a question, Brian.
Yes, go ahead. I'm not restricting any questions at this time.
So I have two worries. The first question I wanted to ask is on the job, while you're on the job with SQL Server, do you have to toggle between the Windows authentication and the mixed authentication? The reason, let me put this so that you can understand my thought. The reason I asked that question is because my understanding is that being in a little bit in IT is that most companies right now, even where I've worked in the past and here, they have what they call the single sign-on, where you have one credentials, which is both your Active Directory login and your Windows login. And once you have that one credentials, that means you can also use that to log into your SQL Server, so long as you fall within that domain group for that you can be granted access to SQL Server. If that is true, in this case, that means if someone logs into your computer on the
your line is muted. Your line is breaking. Muted, we kind of lost you. Your line is breaking. Your network is breaking. So let me just get in here. Milton, can you hear us?
Yeah, I hear you.
Yeah, your line was breaking. So the first thing that I want to say is the kind of single sign-on that you're talking about that is integrated with Active Directory and other applications, SQL does not support that. Okay. SQL does not support single login. You need to actually create that login in SQL for somebody to be able to log into SQL. It's not as if, like, let me say your HR application. If you are using Epico or whatsoever, once you log into your computer, Epico is configured to accept single sign-on, meaning once you have logged into your computer, you can access Epico and do whatsoever you're doing. SQL does not do that. Even if you have a Windows login in your environment, that Windows login still needs to be created in SQL as a login to SQL using Windows. It still has to be created in SQL. Right, that is the first thing that I want to ensure that you
yeah, that answer. Yeah, I get that point. That answer my question. Then that answer my worry. That makes
okay.
sense.
How do I? Are we there?
Yes.
How do I find my SQL username?
Okay, we'll get there. When we are creating logins, we're gonna get there. Okay. All right. So these are the two. We're gonna do that. We are running. Let me do this. So. All right, so now is SQL Server Management Studio, right? I'm just going to tell you, we have talked about SQL Server Management Studio, and this is just a walkthrough. I'm just going to walk through SQL Server Management Studio with you all. So, and then we'll dive into the labs. So this is how you connect to a database, right? To an instance. Remember, when you install SQL, you install an instance, and that instance is known as a database engine. So you can connect to a database engine. And the connection here, you need to select what server you want to connect to. What is the default name for a default instance? Somebody?
SQL Server.
Your computer name.
MS SQL Server.
So this is how I log in. I can log in here. Oh crap! So I can log in here with. It's gonna probably from here. It's gonna take my computer name. I can log in there with my computer name, and I wanted to explain this also. So the default instance takes your computer name to log in. But if I have to log in now to a named instance, this is how the named instance is going to look like. It's going to take your computer name / the instance name, right? You see this. So this is my default instance. The default instance by default is going to show your computer name. But if you are logging into the name instance, it's going to have the computer name / the instance name. So I want you all to log in to your default and your prod instance. Right? Log into your default. Try to log into all your instances. If possible, I have just 2 installed. I didn't finish my homework. So log into your prod, default, and dev. If you are not able to log into anyone, just let me know so we can use that as a troubleshooting step. I know Linda is one of those. So to connect to SQL, what do you need to know? The first thing, you need to have a login, right? Take this in point form. I always want you all to take notes. To log into SQL, this is the process. First, you need to have, the login needs to have permissions, right? So you need a login, which can either be what? Windows or SQL login. That's the first thing. The second thing is you need to know the instance name that you want to log into. If you don't know the instance name, all you can do is go to connect, you go to database engine, then you can browse. If this instance was over the network, I can go to network and I'll browse other instances, right? If it was configure, select a SQL Server instance in the network to your connection, I can do that. But for the most part, if it is on a local computer, you can go here, you will see all the instances that are on that local computer. If you also want to connect to SQL, you can use Management Studio as well. If this instance was installed on another computer, right, not on your local computer, because that is what will happen. At your job, your laptop does not have SQL database engine installed. You have Management Studio. And when you want to connect to an instance that is on a different computer, all you need to do is, you know the computer name and probably you know the instance name. You go in there and type it. Let me say I had another computer called Brian, and that computer has an instance called test, right? From my local computer now, if I type in, if we are in the same network, computers in the network communicate with one another. I want to connect to that instance on that Brian computer, and the instance name is test. I just need to go and type there, and I put on connection. At this point, it will not work because I don't have any computer named Brian. I don't have any instance name called test in my environment. Okay? So that will not work. So let me know who else, who is not able to connect to their instances. Linda is one. Question.
Yes, sir. So how do you have both instances on this Management Studio right here?
Okay, look at my screen. Everyone, yes. You can use this instance with this Management Studio. Again, you need just one Management Studio on your computer. You can connect to every instance on your computer or every instance in your entire network. The first connection, I click on connect, I go to database engine. I click there, I want to connect to I want to click on browse to see all my instances. Here I have two instances. I click on Brio and I click on connect. It connects me. I want to also connect on my prod instance. I click on connect, I go to database engine, I browse, I know it is local on this computer, that is it, I connect. So as long as you have all of those instances installed, you can connect all of them using just this one Management Studio. If this instance was on another computer, all you need to know is, you need to know the computer name and the instance name. You type it there, you'll be able to connect to all of those instances on just one Management Studio. Make sense?
Yes, sir. Thank you.
Okay, everyone, you should have at least two instances connected to. So, but I'm going to work just with one. Let me go with my default instance. So this is where you're going to spend the rest of your career, right? Doing all of this. Under your SQL Server Management Studio, when you connect to an instance, you have, what was I supposed to go through first? Okay, when you connect to an instance, you have this. The databases, we're going to talk about this. This is all the databases that you'll see. We'll talk about system databases, snapshot, and user databases. You have security. Security is where you use this to create logins, reset passwords, create a server roles, create audits, and any of those audit specifications. Anything that has to do with you securing your databases. This is where you do it. You have server objects. Server objects are like linked servers. You need to create locations for, backup devices, endpoints, and triggers, right? This is just walking you through. You will not understand all of this. You have them there. You have replication. Replication is a technology that you use to have a copy of data in multiple locations, right? You want to have data in multiple locations, you use replication to do that. So you have a polybase. This is a new feature in SQL Server that you use it to interact with big data. If you're creating a data warehouse, you can use this to work with, integrate with Oracle and other databases. You can use that. Always on is a high availability solution in SQL Server that you use it. You create availability groups. So we're gonna perform all of this. Right now it's not enabled, but just to tell you that that is it. Some of these things are not enabled yet. Management, this is where you can go. Some people read about creating maintenance plans, everything. Important here, under management, you have a policy management, data collection, resource governor, extended event, maintenance plan, and this. So this is an opportunity for you to go open each of these and do research, read what each does. We're gonna handle all of this by the end of this class. And you have your SQL Server error logs. Error logs are anything that happens in SQL. There's a log to it, right? If I open up my error log now, you see everything. I have errors here that have been happening on this instance of SQL. If I had a login fail attempt, I will be able to see it here. We're gonna see how to review all of these error logs because this is your number one troubleshooting area. When somebody tells you I'm not able to connect to SQL, you need to come to the logs and check that. You have integration services. This is when you have, if you have installed SQL Server integration services on your computer. You have your agent, SQL Server agent, which is where you go and you create all those jobs for automation. You want to set up alerts. If somebody is trying to log into my SQL, let me know. Send an operator, send an email to this operator, a proxy. You also have error logs here, right? And this is just a user interface where you can see all your extended, your profiler and extended event stuff. So this is an overview of what you will see. For now, next class, we're going to be looking at databases. We'll take each of these at a time and we'll work on it. On SQL also, same like any other application, you have file right here. You can click there if you want to connect to another instance. I just click on file, I will connect. I also have, if I want to disconnect from an instance, I can click on this instance and I disconnect. I go to edit. If I want to go to somewhere, find a place or whatsoever, view, just how I want to view my interface. Projects, if I want to create a project could be a migration project I'm doing. I want to create some IIS packages. We'll talk about all of those tools. These are some of the tools that we're going to use in SQL. SQL Profiler, Database Engine, Azure Data Studio. This is now dealing with Azure. You see, so we're going to talk about all of these and how to customize this SQL Server and any other thing that we want. And so this is basically just an overview of what we're going to be working with for the next 5 months. The most important thing here, you all have been struggling about queries and stuff like that. We have the query interface, which is this. When you click on the query interface, it's going to open up, and this is where you can type queries, right? Select add. Let me just say this, add version. If I want to see what version of SQL Server I'm running on, I can just type that query and I click there. I'll click on the execute option. It will tell me I'm running Microsoft SQL Server 2019 RTM version this. This was September 2019. It was released in September of 2019. And this is it, right? So this is an overview of SQL Server. So in my lab, what I planned for us to do today was this: how to access Configuration Manager, right? Changing the service account, starting and stopping services. So we're going to do this and do this as well. Again, in SQL, it's always very easy. So I don't expect you to ask questions on any of these things I have presented. Where's that thing? I don't expect you to ask questions on any of these things because you don't know anything yet, right? Until you start touching them. So for now, just ignore those ones and let's go to the labs. Just have this overview. You can use it for your own learning. Now you can connect to SQL. You can go to SQL. Oh, what is a database? Open that and play with it. Oh, system databases. What are they in system databases? Oh, I see this. What does this one do? Go online, research. Oh, under security, I see this. Let me expand all of this and see what they really say. What are they? Right? You might end up not using any or like up to 50% of these things as a database administrator, right? But at least you can connect now to SQL. You know how to connect to SQL. You know what authentication method you have. So first, right now that we are here, right? This is Management Studio. Let us go to our labs, and the first thing on our labs is to access. If I'm going too fast, guys, let me know. Is it too fast? Any questions here before we move directly to this? Gerard, any question?
No, I'm okay.
Perfect. All right, so the labs for today, this is what I want us to do, right? How to access Configuration Manager. Okay, can you all go to your Configuration Manager? And make sure you pin that on your taskbar. So to go to Configuration Manager, you can just go to your search and you type in Configuration Manager, right? You'll see it there. You'll see SQL Server Configuration Manager 2019. That is it right there. So you can connect to it. It will ask you, do you want to allow this program? Click on yes. And on your Configuration Manager, this is what you'll see. This is what you will see, right? When you open up Configuration Manager, this is what you'll see. Any questions on how to access your Configuration Manager? Any? Yes? No? Maybe?
No.
Okay. So that is perfect. So now on Configuration Manager, same like every other application interface, you are coming here maybe because you want to do something. And remember what we say Configuration Manager is, right? You can use it to configure the services of SQL, start, stop, or do everything. When you look at the root here, this is what it tells you. So this is SQL Server Configuration Manager, right? And remember we talked about services. Services are what we use to run SQL, right? When you install SQL, it comes up with services. It comes up with services. So right here, remember you selected a full text filter, daemon, right? And this was a shared service. So you have this just one, regardless of how many instances you have here. And to check your services that you have on SQL, it comes per the instance name. You see here, the second one tells me SQL Server and the bracket, the instance name. This is my default instance, MS SQL, right? If I see here under the status, this service is running. If I see the startup mode, it is set to what? Automatic, right? The startup mode is set to automatic. If I see the log on as name, so this is the account that is running SQL services now. When you look at this, you see it tells you empty service account. And I explained to you what an empty service account is. If you go back to your slide there, you'll see exactly that this is a local system account that is running SQL. And the disadvantage is that that account has full permission on that system. So naturally, in a corporate world, you need to change this service account. But since we don't have a domain yet and we have not created users, we are not going to do this now, right? But just know that this is the account that is running SQL. How can you check the account that is running your SQL services? You can come here. All right, I'm going to walk you through this. The next thing is under the server browser, right? You have to, is also a service. Since you have default and name instances, these need to be running as well to connect to those default instances. Most of the time, let me see a question. Yes, so please mute. Thank you. All right, so each instance that you install, it comes with its agent. You see here, this is the SQL Server, the default, it comes with its agent. If the service is not running, like I will do here, so you all try to stop your default instance. That's the first thing we will try to do. How to verify if a service is up and running. First thing, if you have it red here, if you have it, you see the green arrow to the left, it means it is running. The red, like this one, my agent here is not running for the prod instance. And how can I see that? If I go over to my SQL, and I connect to my prod instance, let me just do this one more time for you all to see. I connect to my prod. You see, this is my agent here. It is not running. So it is disabled right here. It is not running, right? So I can confirm that here. Okay, wow, this is not running. So I want you all to make sure that all your agents are running, and to start a service in SQL, you just need to right click, start or stop. So I'm going to start this, right? I'm going to start this. So for your default instance, everyone. So if you have additional service types, it means you install more than the required features that we had you to install. Because if you had reporting services, you see a service here that is running reporting services. If you have integration services installed, you see a service here that is running that feature. If you have other things, you will see them here. but don't worry about those. Or if you have multiple instances, you'll see all of those here. So I want you all to stop your SQL service for your prod, for your default instance. So right click there and stop that service. Everybody, stop the services for your prod, your default instance. Let me see the first person who is done.
Done.
Perfect. So now, just to confirm that if this is not working, you cannot connect to your SQL to that instance. So go, if you were connected, disconnect to all of the instances you were connected to, then try to connect to your default instance again, and let me get the error message that you get. What message did you get?
Just keep searching. It's not connecting.
It's still running.
Did you disconnect from it?
Okay, can I connect to the database? So
read the message. One of the things that you need to do is read error messages, right? Read that message that you get there. Let me see.
A new related or instance-specific error occurred while establishing a connection to SQL Server. The server was not found and was not accessible. Verify that the instance name is correct and that the SQL Server is configured to allow the remote connections.
Perfect.
Provided.
So if you see that, if that service, I hope you all understand what the service is now. If that service is not running, then you cannot connect to that instance of SQL Server. So one of the things you do is always to troubleshoot connection issues, right? That is one of the things. Okay, so mine is still going. The next thing that we're going to look at, so we have seen how you can start and stop a SQL service, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so now, then you see, I have that same message. So if I go back to my configuration manager now, if I go back to configuration manager, and where is that at? And I start back, this is not, that was the old one. If I go to my configuration manager, and I start back my SQL service, if I start that, it's gonna start. And I come back here, it is still starting. Hopefully it's done now. Okay, it is done. So if I come back and I click on connect, I should be able to connect. You have just fixed your first issue as a database administrator, and this is what you do. So second thing I want us to see all under configuration manager is, first, remember we talked about the port. I want you to verify what is the default port of that your SQL, your default instance. What is the default port of your default instance? To do that, you right click on the instance. Everybody, are we on the same page, guys?
Yes, sir.
Perfect. I like this class. So here you have seen when you right click, you can go to the properties. How can we verify the port? Okay, just so you know, if I was trying to change the service account here, I can right click, I go to properties, and I go to here where I have the account name, I can browse to see whatever account I have on my computer, right? I can just go to browse. I see what accounts do I have on this computer? Fine. These are all the accounts I have on my computer. If I want to change that service account to run on this account, right? I can just click there, click on OK, click on OK. Then it's going to ask me for the password of that account and I'll put it there. But I don't want to change that, right? We are not doing that right now. But that is how you can change a service account. Our goal in this class is to see what is the port number for your default instance. So right click on the default instance, go to properties. No, that was just, that is not where you get that. So on these properties of the default instance, right, it's just to see where you can start, stop your services, and where you see all of this other information. When you go to the properties of that instance, this is what you see. So I'm going to talk about the port number in the next demo. So it applies to every service here. If they call you that the jobs are failing. If somebody calls you that, okay, I have this SQL Server job that did not run last night, what you need to check first is go to if the agent is off, right? If this SQL Server agent is not running, will I be able to perform any automation? No, because the agent is in charge of running all of those automations, right? It will not work. All your jobs will fail because the SQL Server agent is not running. Key points. Okay, reviewing the chat, please mute, guys. It's distracting. Thank you. Let them know. So the next thing here, remember we talked about aliases, right? I just want to expand all of this so you see.
Excuse me, sir.
Yes.
Is it possible, let me take an instance for this default instance. Is it possible that our default instance is running, but the agent is not running and we still have access to our databases?
Yes, because remember, when you go to SQL Server Management, when you go to Management Studio, here you have your databases. Your databases, this is what the service is related just to this instance, right? To the instance itself. And then the agent, this is the agent. The agent is not running. What would affect this is, what will be affected is all your jobs, they will not be able to run. All your jobs will not be running because your agent is not running. The agent is in charge to run those jobs. So if the agent is off, jobs will not run. Like as compared to this one, you see, I can access here. If I have any jobs here, I can right click on the job and I run it because my agent is on, right? But you'll be able to access your SQL Server. The next thing here, we talked about here, what do you see here? You know, computers always come with a 64, 30, and 32-bit operating system, right? If you are running by the 32-bit operating system, all these protocols, you configure them under here, right? But now, under the 32, under the 64 rather. So, but now, since we are using a 64, this is where we are. So, if you click under the SQL Server network configuration, remember Configuration Manager, you use that to configure the network connections for SQL Server, right? You use that to configure the network connections. So, I think I missed the slide view up. Okay, I think I missed this slide. I didn't explain. So SQL can run on this kind of protocols, right? There are 3 protocols in SQL. You have shared memory, you have TCP, which by default, this is what SQL will run on, right? And then you have name type. So shared memory is the simplest protocol to use and has no configurable settings. So once you install SQL by default, that is enabled. You don't need to do any changes there. The TCP this is a common protocol widely used over the internet, because other people are going to be accessing these SQL applications might be connected from the web to this database. So most of the time, you use the TCP IP protocol. It has to be enabled. If this is not enabled at times, application will not be able to connect to that SQL service, right? That SQL instance as well. And you have the name type, which is the protocol developed mostly for local area networks. So if you are just dealing with local area networks, you don't have anything to do with the internet, name type will be good. But when you are going out of the internet, other people are going to be connecting to these databases. So TCP or TCP IP is the protocol to use. Not to dwell more on that, on our networking guys. So when you go under networking, network configurations, you see each instance of SQL that you install has its own configuration, right? By default, what will be enabled is a shared memory and the TCP network. How do you check that? You just go under the SQL Server network configuration and you check that. You see this one is enabled, name pipe is disabled. I can actually right click there and enable it. There are some applications that they'll specifically say, okay, connect just through name pipe, right? So if that kind of application is having difficulties connecting, they might send you a ticket. Can you enable name pipe communication on that SQL? You need to come here, you right click it and you enable it, right? And you have the shared memory, you do nothing there. So the most one that we are concerned with, for the most part, SQL will use TCP. Most communications, they're gonna use TCP. And we said a default instance of SQL. What is the port number?
4133.
What?
4133.
Minus $10.
1433.
1433.
You owe me $10 here. So
1433.
1433.
perfect.
Thank
So
you.
how do
Thank
I
you for
check that? How do I check that? I'll come here under my configuration manager. I go to properties. You see, I can enable and disable any configuration protocol there, right? I go to my properties. So under my properties, I go to IP addresses. So to get that port number, I will scroll all the way to the bottom. That is where I want you to pay attention to. This is the port number that the default instance is listening to. And on that port number here, you have a question, how can you check the port number of SQL, right? You need to come here, Configuration Manager, under the network configuration, you right click on the instance, you go to properties, and you click on IP address. So now, what is the port number that this default instance is listening to?
1433.
1433.
Okay, so somebody, if your name pipe is disabled, you can enable it.
Okay.
So somebody tell me this is going to Romeo. Romeo, what is the port number that your prod instance is listening to? Romeo is not there. Ephraim, what is the port number that your prod instance is listening to?
Mine is 50,981.
One moment, let me put it out real quick. So 56341.
56341. Beautiful. So again, when we are talking about port numbers, we know the default is this. The default
Mine is 51255.
Perfect. So you all know how to get your port number. These are the basic things that you need to know as a DBA, guys. I'm so happy. So,
but we should be able to change the named instance port numbers, right?
Yes, one moment. I'm coming there. So now, when we talk of the communication, the port numbers, right? One of the things that you understand is when you talk of port numbers, there are two ways, there are two types of port numbers, right? There are two types of port numbers. You have is dynamic. So let me start with the static. And we start with static and a dynamic port number. What are the differences? A static port number means that but it will always be there. It will not change, right? It will not change. And the dynamic port number, it means that it will change each time. Change each time SQL service is restarted, right? So these are the two types of port number you have. By default, we have said, since your default instance, regardless of what you do, that is a port that it has to use. It's 1433. If you go to your configuration manager on your default instance, you see that the port number is here, 1433. You see, there are two. Under the port, you see TCP dynamic port and TCP port. So this default instance is a static, because even though it's not reaching there, but it's static, it does not change. You don't need to change that, right? That's the default. If you change it, you'll not be able to communicate over that port. Then you have a dynamic port. You see that for all your named instances on your prod, the port number is going to be where you have dynamic, right? Can somebody confirm that?
Mine on my prod is on my prod instance.
Confirm.
Are we there?
Yes, go ahead.
On my prod instance, the TCP dynamic port is 51255. The TCP, the CPP port itself, there is no figure on it.
So I'm not saying, okay, for your name instance, what name instance are you looking at?
I'm looking at the prod.
Okay, what is the port number that it is listening to?
The TCP dynamic port is 50255.
Please mute yourself, Emmanuel Chi. So, okay, look at here. Is it under the TCP port or is under the TCP dynamic port?
It is under the TCP dynamic port.
No, it is not. That is your default instance. Share your screen.
I think mine is the same.
Share your screen, let me see.
Brian, the same thing.
Share your screen, let me see.
The TCP port is empty.
Yeah, it's
and
the
dynamic
same.
is.
But that is what I'm saying, because for your prod instance, your TCP is under the dynamic port, because the dynamic port, it can change at every time. So take that number, go ahead and restart. Let me explain the issue with the dynamic port so you all can see, right? Look at my screen here. So we call this one, your default instance will be on this port, and this is static.
Yeah.
So the dynamic port, which is my prod, if I go to my prod here, I go right here, I'll see it that it is static, right? I'll see that it's static. I mean, it's a dynamic. So this is 5, 54562. But now, why do we not want dynamic port? First, what is the difference? The difference is that with dynamic port, it will change each time your SQL Server instance will restart. Let's take, for instance, my dynamic port now is 54562, right? In one of my applications that were connected to SQL Server, I gave them this port to connect. This is my application that is connecting to SQL Server today. I gave this application this port number that, okay, use this as a connection string. So what happened if I restart SQL services now? Look at that number. And now let me go ahead and restart my SQL services. I am getting really old. So if I go here, right, if I go here under properties, I go and I say, okay, this is 54 this. So I want to restart my SQL services for my prod instance. This is my prod instance, right click, and I do restart. Let us see what happens with that port. Let us see what happens with that port. So it is disadvantageous to have dynamic ports because each time SQL Server restarts, it changes that port. So in this, my scenario now, this application, because I have restarted SQL services and this port has come up now to be, let me see, where do I get that? So if I go there, right click, I go to the properties, I go to the IP, right? This port now has come up to be what? 54, I did not restart. So let me refresh this. I'll do refresh that. Okay. So if I go back to my prod, right here, I go to my TCP. I right click there, I go to properties and I go to the IP. I will see that that port 54562, that did not change. No, it is supposed to change. Oh, this changes after you have restarted your computer. Yeah, so this will change after you restart your computer. I don't know why I thought it was going to change when you do this. Let me exit out of here and go to, just to be sure that it changes right here.
I'm having a quick question.
One moment, let me just get this figured out. So this port is going to change after you restart your computer. So the port will only change when you restart your computer. So when you restart SQL services, it will not change. So what happens is you always want your SQL to run on a static port. But what is the disadvantage? If somebody gets hold of this port, they can get here anytime. But if you leave it dynamic as well, applications will not be connecting, because let's say we restart SQL services and this port here changes to, if the port changes to, let me call it now, 54682, right? And this your application new, but this port, it will not be able now to connect to this one, right? Until you come here and make some changes, which is some heavy work. So for the most part, I want you to change your port numbers all to be static port. So your configuration manager, go under your properties for your prod instance and just copy what you have there, put it under the TCP port. So that dynamic, it will always be there. So copy what you have it, put it over there, and then it will reset it for all your instances. Any questions on the port?
Quick question, please.
Yes.
On my system, I have the protocol for the Microsoft SQL Server. I don't have the protocol for Pro.
How many instances do you have installed?
I have 3. I have a default and I have Pro and G.
Share your screen. So while he's sharing his screen, I want you to go to all of your instances, copy the dynamic port there, and just put it where you have the SQL, the TCP port, and click on OK. That is how you change a port number from dynamic to static, or from static to dynamic, the other way around. Go ahead and share your screen. Let me see. Okay.
Brian, so when we do that, do we have to leave the dynamic port number the same, or just
delete it? So I want you to cut off that dynamic and put it under the TCP. Okay, click on close out of your configuration manager and come back in. Oh, hold on, let me see. Just click on Server, SQL Server Services, the second option on the top. On the top, go up, one more, yeah. So how many instances do you have installed?
Right here, only one. It's only my default is showing right here.
Have you had SQL installed on your computer before?
I did that. I did both the, what do you call it? Both
He did the prod and the dev.
Maybe
Yeah.
you forgot to connect it.
Okay, one moment. So close out of this configuration manager.
Okay.
Did you X out of it? Go to click to configuration manager to the right, go to your right, configuration manager, the other one, bring that up. Close out of it, X out of it. Okay, so bring up your SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, I want you to connect to your prod instance. Let me see.
Can you see?
Yeah, connect. Perfect. So go to your search on your computer, type in configuration manager. Go to search because that probably is the old configuration manager that you have. Type in configuration manager. Configuration, F. So select the configuration manager 2019. Okay, click on SQL Services.
Okay,
all right.
I'm good.
So you probably had that up, but you had not refreshed that. Did you just install this in class today?
Yes, I did that right now.
All
when
right.
you tell us to create the files, I just did straight away.
All right, so that is the reason, because you had not refreshed it. You already had that open, so you had to close it and refresh it to have that. So if you click on your prod now, you can enable that and you go check the port numbers, right? These are basic things that as a database administrator, you have to know, and that's why we are really laying emphasis in your first 2 weeks for you to understand all of this. So perfect. That is how you change your port number. What you have learned now is you can verify your port number that SQL is listening to. You can change the port number. There are other things that we need to talk about, but for the sake of this, your level right now, we're not going to talk on those, right? Just pick the ones that we have talked about. All your port numbers should be in a dynamic, in static port right now. And remember, I told you all about creating an alias. So to create an alias, all you need to do is you go to the SQL Server native client configuration, you click on aliases, definitely the one below here, right? This is the 64-bit operating system. If an application is connected to your computer using the 32-bit, that is where you create the alias. But don't worry about that. I know you all have 64. So to create an alias, all you need to do is click on aliases, you right-click there, you go to new alias. We are not gonna do this in class. It tells you the alias name. I was talking about prod A, and then I want it to no port number, or if I have the port number of that old server, TCP, I want it to use TCP, then I put the server. This is the old server. The old server was prod, right? Then I'm gonna do that, but that is not all about it. Let me close this before you start asking questions about creating aliases. It's above the scope of this second week, right? But that is where you create the alias. That is just to tell you, these are the things you can do under SQL Server Configuration Manager. Summary, you can see if your services are running. You can start and stop your services. You can change your service account. Now you can verify what protocols are enabled. You can check from the TCP, you can check your port numbers. You know there are two types of port numbers, a static and a dynamic. For the static port, you see where it is. You can actually change to dynamic. And then this port, you don't know. Each time you do this, you just need to tell your security guys, hey, I've enabled this port on SQL, and they'll be able to open that over the network or over the computer for you. So that is it for Configuration Manager, guys. You all good? Let me see my So here, how to access Configuration Manager, changes the saving account. You have not done that because we have not created an account yet. Starting and stopping services, configuring SQL Server network, enable and disable protocols. You can do that. Verify and set the port numbers. Name the port numbers, name from a dynamic to static. We have done that. How to connect to SQL Server via Management Studio and connect to multiple instances. We have done that. Demonstrate the difference between a computer name and an instance name. That is one thing that I have to do. So what is your computer name, right? Somebody asked me if you can change the name of a computer of an instance. So the answer is you can, but it is not advisable to change the instance name. If you have already installed this instance, and you see that it's not correct, the best thing for you, since you have just installed it, is to uninstall and reinstall the instance, right? But you can change your computer name after installing. You can change your computer name, but you need to run a script to actually say that this name should, because SQL now already knows this computer name. If I change this computer name, it will be confusing SQL. So if I rename my computer, I can come back and change my SQL, write a script to update SQL to know that this computer name has been changed. But you cannot change the instance name, right? You can change it, but it is not advisable. You need to go through a lot. So you don't change that. If somebody tells you change, you say, no, I'd rather prefer to uninstall or install a new instance. You don't do that, right? So I'll give you an assignment to change your computer name and make sure that it is updated in SQL. That is going to be a research topic for you all today. I did not know this until I started working. So on my lab again, I see here, so the computer name and the instance name, we all understand that when you are connecting to SQL Server, right? If the default instance, it picks your computer name. If it's a name instance, it picks the name of the computer and the instance name. So if you could connect to SQL database that is on another computer, what you see here, when you click on connect, you just put in that computer name here, and then you put in the instance name. Okay, so these are the differences. Default instance, you just put in the computer name. But if it's a name instance, you need to put in the computer name / the instance name in order to connect. Perfect. All right. The next thing, what have we done? Check default locations. We have done that in class here. Okay, somebody said, yes, makes more difficult for hackers. Okay, I'm not going to look at that now. Checking your file locations, we have done that. One of the post configuration changes, again, in SQL, we have 10 more minutes, is assigning a maximum memory, right? Because, each time you install SQL, SQL is an application that needs a lot of memory to run. So our computer today is 16 gigabyte of RAM that we have installed. And on this 16 gigabyte, we want to make sure that we allocate just the maximum for each instance of SQL. If we don't attach SQL instance 1 that use this, instance 2 use this, instance 3 use this, then SQL can use all the memory. Your computer will be running slow and something like that. You always need to allocate enough memory to SQL, right? How do you check the SQL memory after installation? So to check the SQL memory after installation, you all should do this with me. You connect to the instance that you want to check, right? You connect to your instance. I want to check how much memory is allocated to my default instance. I right click there, I go to properties, and I will see the memory tab, right? So by default, you are always concerned with this, maximum server memory. This is the maximum server memory that you want SQL to use in megabyte. And this one, the maximum needs to come from your memory on your computer. You all should have 16 gig. How do I know? If I go to my task manager, I go to performance, then I can see here under my memory, I can see it here, my computer has 16 gigs, right? Or I can just go to wheresoever I want to go to check that. So I want to assign a maximum memory to this my SQL server, right? So what is the minimum memory that you need to have to install SQL? It's 2, right?
4 gigabyte.
Is it 2
How do you
gigabyte
get
or
the
4?
task manager?
It's 4.
4 gigabytes.
So you need 4. So at this point, I want you all to assign your server maximum memory for all of those instances to use just 4. So if you have 3 instances, you will use 4, 4, 4. That's 12, and you still have 4 for your operating system. So 4 actually is 4,000 something megabyte, but I'm just going to put 4,000. Right?
Where is that?
Please, Elvis, mute.
Yes.
Thank you.
Where?
Elvis, can you mute?
Where are we right now?
Is that question directed to me or?
Yes, sir.
What is your question?
Where are we?
Maybe just take it all over. Yeah.
So each time you install SQL, right, the minimum requirement for memory is 4 GB to run your SQL, right? That's a minimum. So if you have above 4, it is good. So when you install SQL, one of the things that you need to do after installing post configuration changes is to set the maximum memory that SQL can use. So as of now, our computer total has 16 GB. Our computer has 16 GB of memory.
Are we going to change it for all?
Yes, you're going to change for all, make it 4:4. So this our computer has 16 GB of memory. Now, I want SQL need memory. If I don't allocate a maximum memory that SQL should use, if I'm running a lot of transactions in SQL can, this instance, just this one instance can use all the 16, and the other instances will not have anything to use. So each time you install SQL, it is good to allocate a maximum memory to SQL. Microsoft recommends the best practice that 80% of your system memory should be given to SQL. Then, if SQL have 80%, your operating system will have 20%. So in our case today, our operating system has 16 GB, right? And we want to allocate 80% of that to SQL. We have 3 instances of SQL. So what is 80% of 16? I'm not a math student, believe me. What is 80% of 16? Is it about 12 something? 12. Perfect. So we're going to follow that best practice, right? That is what Microsoft recommends. Note this. When it comes to memory allocation, Microsoft recommends 80% of system memory to be allocated to SQL. So since we have 3 instances, and to change that server memory, right, it is per instance level. Your memory is per instance. So I need to come to this instance. I say, you guy, I go to your properties. What amount of memory will you use? If I don't allocate it, by default, when you install SQL, you have this 2 million or 2 trillion, something like that, right? So here, I need to allocate the maximum memory. It has to be 4 gig. I'm just going to put 4,000. Normally, it's supposed to be 4,000 and something. And then I click on OK. That is how you change your server memory. How much amount of memory do you want SQL to use? I do the same for my front instance. One moment, let me finish this. Memory, I allocate this to 4,000. That is okay. So now what will happen is, as a database administrator, your SQL users are going to say, my computer, the database are running slow, my queries are running slow. You need to make sure that your SQL has enough memory allocated to it. So right now, if we say, man, this server is running slow, I can literally go there, somebody mute yourself, I go to the properties. Who is that? Where is that noise coming from? Oluwatoshi. Thank you for muting. So I can literally go here under my memory tab, right? And I increase this. I say, man, this box has been running so slow. You know what? Let me increase it to 5 GB. I click on OK, and I change it. This is where you change your server memory. And what is the best practice? SQL should use 80% of your system memory. And you can do this. You have to do this for all your instances. Okay. Are you saying that it is important to change the port number for named instances in the corporate world? The port number for named instances? Yes, it is important to change them to static port, just so you know and you can actually manage the security of those ports. It is important to change it. Okay, what are the precautions to be taken when uninstalling an instance? We'll get to those ones. All of those things, we'll get to them. That is called server decommissioning. What are the precautions to take when you are uninstalling? That is server decommissioning. We'll get to that. So let's just look at this. What is the best practice when it comes to allocating memory to your SQL? 80% of system memory, right? How do you change your server memory? You go under the instance and you set the server memory to what you want. Let me say later on we increase our RAM to 30 GB and we want to make SQL to run faster. What I need to come here, what I need to do is come here, then I go under the memory and I increase this, right? It will make SQL to run faster. The more memory you get, the more faster things are going to work. Any questions as far as memory is concerned?
Good question, please.
Yes.
Yeah, currently right now I'm using a laptop that has a 12 gig. I just have ordered for the 16 gig, which is about, I'm expecting by Tuesday to arrive. But what I did about my memory, I share it both the default and the 2 instance. I share it by 30. Since we are using 18% of the requirement for now, I'm sure it's going to be slow. Am I right?
No, yeah, that is fine. You can always allocate more as you want, but we are not performing transactions in SQL now, so that is okay. And just know this is in megabyte. If you put 30 megabyte, if you put 30 here, that is not 3 gigs, right? So it has to be 3,000 in order for it to be 3
Yeah, I put 3,000.
Okay, that is fine. So this is where you change you allocate the server memory, right? I wanted you all to see that. At the end of the class today, you all should be good. Okay, so the last thing that I want to check here is authentication mode, right? So how do you change your authentication mode? Can someone, let me see who is in class, someone just tell me what authentication mode you have SQL running on. I don't know your names really well yet. Nuela, Nuela is there. Muna, Maxine, Joel. Joel, are you there? Joel, are you there? Unmute.
Mixed mode, Brian.
And who is that? Is that Joel? Guys, I just want to make sure that all of these names I'm seeing are in class. Danielle, are you there?
Excuse me, Brian.
Yes.
Present.
So, Brian.
Yes.
I don't know if you've looked at the charts, but looks like they're still worried about port numbers. You probably want to.
Yes.
I
was just about to ask that.
Okay, I'll take a look at that. Let me round this up.
Okay.
What are the precautions taken when on SQL? I'll look that. Okay, I'll respond that when we are done with this. So just stay in class. Class should be over by now. So the next thing I want you all have seen your authentication methods, right? That you have enabled for your instance. So if I want to see that, all I need to do is I go to here, the instance itself. I go here, I go under to my connection. I will see, hold on, security. I will see what authentication mode I have enabled. So when I have SQL Server and Windows authentication, it means I can create both SQL Server logins and Windows logins to this instance. If I have just Windows authentication, it means I cannot have any SQL Server authentication login to this instance. So just understand these two things, and this is where you can change them, right? So at times, if I keep it just to Windows, and somebody is trying to log into SQL using a SQL authentication, it will fail because SQL authentication is not enabled in this class, right? It's not enabled on this instance. Let me just round up, make sure we gather everything I had here. Test connection, test Windows versus SQL connection. Yeah, we have not created a SQL login yet, but if you remember when you were installing SQL Server, there was a place that you put in a password, right? There was a place you put in a password. So that password was coming in with an SA account. That was a system administrator account for this SQL Server. If you go under logins to see all your logins, you go under logins, you'll see an SA account. So this is a SQL account, right? When you are creating, and the password that you provided, password one, you can use that to log into this instance. So let me say I want to use SA now to log into this instance. That's a SQL authentication. I go to connect the database engine. I select SQL Server Authentication. I'll do SA because that's a service account. It is always there when you install SQL. And I put in the password one that we provided. Then boom, you see, I'm also logged into this instance of SQL as SA. You see, this is
again. Can you come again?
I should come again?
Yeah, can you? Can you take it again?
No, I was just asking if you wanted me to repeat it again.
Yeah.
Spoil mine, Milton. Okay, so this is what you see, right? We have Windows and SQL authentication. When we were installing SQL, it asks you to add your current user. I added my current user, which I can see here under the logins. My current user was C Brian. That is what I used to log into my computer, right? And then when you're installing SQL, by default, SQL creates you a SA account. That is a service account. This account here is just it has administrative privileges over this instance of SQL. This is a service account, and it's a SQL login. Look at this now. The SQL login, it has just the name there. It doesn't have all of these. These ones are local Windows accounts. You see the Windows name. This one are local NT accounts in the system. But this SA is a service account. So now I am already logged into Windows, and I'm able to log into SQL because my account, which is brio/this, have access to this SQL instance. So now, if I want to log in as SA, right? So on any computer now, I could, if the computers are communicating with this, I could just go to any computer because I know, let me cancel this.
The network you're talking about, is it a Wi-Fi network?
As long as the computers are communicating with one another, but most of the time, servers don't use Wi-Fi network. They'll use a line, they'll actually plug in that. So if I go here, I can, if I want to connect with SQL authentication, right? I click there, I put SQL authentication, I type in the SA. You all should try to log in using SQL authentication as well. Bring the SA, and I give my password 1. Remember, when you were installing SQL, it asks you for a password. That password that you were providing was for this SA account. That was a sysadmin account for that server. Connect. So I'm logging out to this instance as SA, right? It tells me, if you look, the blue thing, the very last option there tells me SA. Let me log in again to that same instance with the Windows authentication so you can see this. You see, at the very bottom, at the very end here, it tells me I'm logging as Brian C. Brian. That is a Windows authentication. Here, at the very end there, I'm logging as SA. That's a system admin account. That is why you never want to forget the system admin password, right? You always, the system admin password account, you always want to keep it. That is why I said you all use password 1, so we all know.
So, Brian.
Yes.
At this point with the mixed mode, we have 2 options to connect into the SQL Server, which is a Windows, and the SQL Server authentication mode. So is there any way we can disable the Windows authentication mode and just leave the SQL Server for security reasons?
Perfect.
Because yes. At this point, I know someone can still, even though we have the SQL Server authentication mode set, or the SQL Server it's been set to mixed mode, but at this point, someone can still log into the SQL Server using the Windows authentication mode.
Yes, so this is what I want us to do, right? I've just disabled, first thing I have disabled, let me just restart this. I have disabled SQL authentication. So remember, you saw me log in with the SA account, which was a SQL account. So I've disabled that SQL authentication, right? By default, you cannot disable Windows authentication. Windows authentication is going to be there. If you don't want somebody to log into Windows and have access to SQL, then don't create that login in SQL. Everybody can have a Windows login, but if that Windows login is not created in SQL, the person will not be able to log into SQL. That's the first thing I need to understand. Everybody in your company, they can log into computers in your company, but not everybody can get into SQL. The default communication method for SQL is Windows authentication, right? Look at, this is it. But if right now it's Windows authentication, if somebody, let me say I had 5 computers in my environment and somebody just logged into computer 1 and the person's name is Ephraim. If Ephraim does not have a login here, because you are logged into computer 1, you will not be able to access SQL because I have not created a login for you for SQL. But now that, do you understand that, Ephraim?
Let me make sure I got your point very well. So during the installation process, I know we added the local user as one of the users. Is that where the problem is coming from?
So I've added that local user, right? I've added that local user. Now, I don't want this local user to have access to SQL, just for example, right?
Okay.
I'm gonna disable this. First, let me first of all show this. I have disabled the SQL authentication. I have just Windows authentication. If I want to log into my prod instance now, with a SQL authentication, I put in that SA and I put the password 1, and I try to log in. You see, login failed. Gotcha. See, it tells me login failed because SQL authentication is not enabled. Why? How do I see that? If I want to see why that failed, this is just, the class is over, guys, but I just want to round this up. If I want to see why that failed, I can go under my error logs and it will tell me You see, it will tell me login failed for user as a reason. An attempt to log in using SQL authentication failed. Server is configured for integrated authentication only. So the integrated authentication in this case is Windows authentication. It tells me here, login failed for user as a reason. An attempt to log in using SQL authentication failed. Do you understand that now?
Yes, sir.
Okay, so it failed because SQL authentication on this instance, what is enabled is just, not the security, is just the Windows authentication. I cannot log in with SQL. But if I enable this now, I will be able to log in with both, right? If I enable this, I've enabled that. Let me restart this. And I think, I'm just gonna stop recording from this one. 10 minutes above is not too bad. Okay, so I've restarted that, right? So now we know that we can do all. Even though we created your account, Ephraim, your Windows account, you added that when you were installing SQL. If I don't want that account to log in, right? If I don't want that account to log into SQL, I can literally go here under security, the logins, and I disable this account, right? I'm gonna go to the properties of this account and I disable it. Under the status, let me just say, disable. I want to disable that account. Even though I can still log into my Windows. You see, it tells me the account, login failed for user, this. Okay, yeah, that is because that account is already disabled. I'm the one who logged in now. So let me try to log in with my SA account.
No, try to log in with the user, the Windows account. That's what you disabled.
Yeah, so if I go to login now, database, this is my Windows, right? Windows authentication, I click on connect. What does it say?
Perfect, that's what I wanted to know, thank you.
Login failed for user, this reason the account is disabled. So if that account is disabled, or if I even delete that account here, then that is it. So right now, what happened is, I've disabled on my Windows account. I cannot even log into SQL to enable mixed mode. What if, okay, this is a practical scenario now. What if I had not enabled SQL authentication and I disabled this my account? I'm screwed, right?
Yes.
Okay, so now I can log in back as password 1, then I can go back and enable
it. Okay.
So I can enable my account back. Ephraim, you almost make me cause a problem here. All right. Okay, guys, I think that is it for today. Every other thing will come as an assignment to you all.
Thank you very much, Brio. That was a great one.
Let me stop.